I want to begin tonight not with a theory, but with a confession that took me 30 years to make. For 3 decades, I walked among the wealthiest men of my generation. I sat across from Andrew Carnegie when his eyes still burned with the fire of conquest. I watched Henry Ford pace the floor of his office, his mind already 3 years ahead of his factory. I listened to Thomas Edison speak of failure as if it were a beloved teacher who had simply demanded a longer apprenticeship. And in all those years, in all those long conversations, I came to a conclusion that disturbed me more than any other discovery I made about the science of success. The men who lived in poverty were not poor because of the world. They were poor because of what they did every single day, without thinking, without noticing, without ever once suspecting that their own hands were digging the grave of their fortune. I want you to sit with that thought for a moment. Because what I am about to share with you is not the kind of truth that flatters. It is the kind of truth that cuts. And only those who are willing to be cut will ever be truly healed. There is an old idea, repeated so often that it has lost its teeth, that says a man becomes what he thinks about most. I believed this for many years. I taught it. I wrote it on the first page of my notebooks and underlined it twice. But as I grew older, as I watched men rise and fall, as I observed the secret rhythms of their lives, I began to see something deeper. A man does not become what he thinks about. A man becomes what he repeats. And the repetitions of his life, the small, invisible, automatic gestures of his days, are the true architects of his destiny. Thoughts visit you, habits live with you, and whatever lives with you eventually becomes you. This is the first law I want to engrave upon your mind tonight. Your poverty, if you have any, is not an accident. It is a craftsman. It has been at work in your life for years, perhaps for decades, building its small monument out of the bricks of your daily routine. The hour you wake, the first thought you allow into your mind, the voice you listen to before you have even formed your own, the way you speak about money when no one is watching, the way you spend the final hour of your evening. These are not small matters. These are the chisels that carve the statue of your future. And most men, I am sorry to say, have handed those chisels to a stranger. But the most surprising part comes only now. Because when I studied the men who broke free from poverty, and I do not mean only financial poverty, I mean the poverty of spirit, the poverty of vision, the poverty of will, I discovered that they did not begin their transformation by adding new habits. They began by subtracting old ones. They became wealthy not by what they took up, but by what they put down. And this is the discovery that changes everything if a man has the courage to apply it. Consider for a moment the strange case of Andrew Carnegie. When I first met him, he told me something I never forgot. He said that for the first 10 years of his rise, he kept a small notebook in his coat pocket, and in it he wrote not his goals, not his plans, not his dreams, but his weaknesses. Every habit that drained him, every tendency that pulled him backward, every small surrender he made to comfort, to fear, to the easier path. He told me that he reviewed this notebook every Sunday evening, and he asked himself one question, and only one. Which of these is still alive in me? Because Carnegie understood, long before the modern science of the mind confirmed it, that a man cannot build a cathedral on a foundation of rotten wood. You may lay the finest marble, you may import the rarest gold, but if the foundation is decayed, the cathedral will fall. And the foundation of a man's life is not what he aspires to, it is what he tolerates. I want you to ask yourself right now what you tolerate, not what you want, not what you dream of, what you tolerate, because what you tolerate is what you have agreed to. And what you have agreed to is what your life will continue to deliver with the cold precision of a mechanism that has no opinion about your suffering. The first habit that impoverishes a man is the habit of unconscious consumption. I do not mean only the consumption of food, though that is part of it. I mean the consumption of noise, the consumption of opinions that are not your own, the consumption of images that leave residues in the mind long after the eyes have closed. The modern man wakes in the morning, and before his feet have touched the floor, he has already swallowed 1,000 fragments of other people's anxieties. He has read the headlines that were written to disturb him. He has scrolled through the lives of strangers and felt, in the silent chambers of his chest, the small and corrosive sting of comparison. And then he wonders by noon why he feels tired, why he cannot focus, why his definite purpose, if he ever had one, has dissolved like sugar in hot water. What Hill said about this subject is deeply unsettling, and I will say it again now in plainer words. The mind is a magnetic field. It attracts what it is tuned to, and the first hour of your morning is the tuning fork of your entire day. If you tune your mind to the chaos of the world, your day will be chaos. If you tune your mind to the fears of strangers, your day will be fear. There is no escape from this law. There is only obedience or ignorance. And ignorance in the matter of the mind is the most expensive luxury a man can afford. I knew a young man once in the years after the Great War who came to me with a question that I have never forgotten. He asked me how a man could change his fortune when he had no money, no education, no powerful friends, and no inheritance. I looked at him for a long moment, and then I asked him a question of my own. I asked him what he did in the first hour after he opened his eyes. He looked at me as if I had insulted him. He said it did not matter. He said he wanted to talk about important things, about investments, about opportunities, about the secrets of wealth. And I told him, with as much kindness as I could gather, that he had just answered his own question. Because a man who does not master the first hour of his day will never master the last hour of his life. And no opportunity, no investment, no secret of wealth will ever rescue a man from the slow poison of an unconscious morning. The detail most people overlook is hidden right here. It is hidden in the gap between waking and acting. In that small sacred interval, the subconscious mind is more receptive than at any other moment. It is soft. It is open. It is waiting to be impressed. And whatever you place into it during those minutes will travel with you through the entire day, like a hidden passenger steering a ship that you believed you alone commanded. The wealthy men I knew understood this without ever speaking of it. They guarded their mornings as a king guards his treasury. They did not surrender that hour to the noise of the world. They used it. They shaped it. They poured into it the images of what they intended to become. Now, the second habit that impoverishes a man is more difficult to see because it disguises itself as virtue. It is the habit of busyness without direction. There is a kind of motion that looks like progress, but is in truth only flight. A man who is afraid to confront his definite purpose will fill his days with 1,000 small tasks, each one urgent, each one demanding, each one entirely beside the point. He will answer every message. He will attend every meeting. He will respond to every small fire that flickers around him. And at the end of the day, he will fall into bed exhausted, and he will tell himself that he worked hard. But hard work without direction is not labor. It is decoration. It is the elaborate pageantry of a man who has chosen activity over honesty. I watched this happen to more men than I can count. They were not lazy. That was the tragedy. They were industrious in the smallest possible ways. They were faithful servants of every demand except the one that mattered. And the years passed, and their hair grew gray, and they wondered why the great life they had imagined had never arrived. It had not arrived because they had never built the road to it. They had only paved the side streets again and again with admirable diligence and complete misdirection. Here begins the darkest game of the subconscious mind, because busyness is the favorite drug of the man who is afraid to think. And thinking, true thinking, the kind that asks, what am I actually doing with my one life, is the most painful and most necessary act a human being can perform. It is painful because it forces a confrontation with the gap between who you are and who you said you would be. And most men, faced with that gap, choose to fill their calendar instead of crossing the canyon. They run from the silence in which their definite purpose might finally speak. If you would escape poverty, and again I mean every form of poverty, you must learn to sit in that silence. You must learn to do less, but to do it with the full weight of your soul behind it. The wealthy mind is not the busy mind. The wealthy mind is the focused mind. It has gathered its scattered powers and aimed them like a lens gathering sunlight at a single point. And that single point, sustained over time, will burn through anything. There is no obstacle in the world that can withstand the patient pressure of a concentrated purpose. But there is also no concentrated purpose that can survive a life of unconscious busyness. You must choose. The world will not choose for you. The third habit And perhaps the cruelest of all is the habit of speaking poverty into your own life. I tell you with all the seriousness I possess that the words a man uses about himself are the seeds of his future. Every time you say, "I cannot afford it," without thinking, you are not describing a fact. You are casting a spell. You are programming the magnificent and obedient machinery of your subconscious mind to find every reason, every circumstance, every small confirmation that you indeed cannot afford it, and it will obey you. It will obey you with a precision that would terrify you if you ever truly understood it. I learned this from a woman, of all people, in a small town in Ohio, when I was still young and full of the confidence that comes from having read more books than one has lived. She was a widow. She had lost everything. And yet, when I spoke with her, I noticed that she never used the language of loss. She did not say, "I am poor." She did not say, "Times are hard." She said, with a small and steady smile, "I am between harvests." And I understood, in that moment, more about the laws of the mind than I had learned in 5 years of study, because she had refused to let her tongue be the architect of her despair. She had insisted against every visible evidence on the language of her future rather than the language of her present. I want you to listen for the next 7 days to the words you use about money, about opportunity, about your own capacities. Listen as if you were a stranger overhearing yourself, and I promise you, you will be horrified. You will hear yourself dozens of times each day, casually rehearsing the script of your own limitation. You will hear yourself dismiss possibilities before they have even been examined. You will hear yourself agree with circumstances that you did not consciously choose to accept. And in that horror, in that uncomfortable awareness, the seed of your liberation will be planted. Because no man can change a habit he has not yet seen. But once he sees it, truly sees it, in the cold light of honest observation, the habit begins to lose its power. The unconscious, once made conscious, can no longer rule you in secret. The fourth habit, and I will speak of it briefly, though it deserves a book of its own, is the habit of associating with minds that drain you. The Mastermind principle, which I have spoken of many times, is not merely a philosophy. It is a physical law of the mental world. The minds in your immediate environment are not neutral. They are radiating every moment their dominant frequencies into the field of your own thought. If they are radiating fear, you will absorb fear. If they are radiating cynicism, you will absorb cynicism. If they are radiating the small and bitter satisfactions of mediocrity, you will slowly and without noticing begin to find those same satisfactions in yourself. And this is how a man with great capacity becomes a man of small results. Not through any failure of his own talent, but through the silent contamination of his daily company. I do not ask you to abandon your friends. I do not ask you to climb above your loved ones in some cold arithmetic of utility. I ask you only to become aware, to notice, to observe without judgment the effect that each person in your life has upon the energy of your mind. There are some who leave you after every conversation with the strange sensation of having been quietly subtracted from. And there are others, rare, precious, often unexpected, who leave you feeling expanded, sharpened, called towards something larger than yourself. The wealthy mind seeks out the second kind, not always, not exclusively, but deliberately, with intention, with the recognition that the company you keep is not a social matter. It is a structural matter. It is one of the load-bearing walls of the cathedral you are trying to build. The real turning point begins here, in this small but profound recognition, because the moment you understand that your habits are not personality traits but design choices, you have crossed the great river. You are no longer a passenger in your own life. You are, perhaps for the first time, the architect. And the architect's first task, before any new building can rise, is the careful and unsentimental demolition of what no longer serves the purpose. I want to speak now of something more delicate, more interior, more difficult to name. There is a habit that runs beneath all the others, a kind of underground river that feeds them all. It is the habit of self-betrayal, of making small promises to yourself and breaking them, of saying, "I will begin tomorrow," and not beginning, of declaring intentions that the rest of your life is organized to defeat. Each broken promise to yourself is a small wound, and the wounds accumulate. They form over years a thick scar tissue of distrust, and eventually you no longer believe yourself when you make a vow. Your own word in your own ears has become hollow. And a man who cannot believe his own promises cannot become wealthy in any meaningful sense, because wealth, true wealth, is built upon the foundation of self-trust. Without it, no definite purpose can stand. With it, almost any definite purpose can be fulfilled. The way out of this habit is not grand. It is small, almost embarrassingly small. You must begin to keep tiny promises to yourself. Promises so small that you cannot fail them. You said you would rise at 6. Rise at 6. You said you would write for 10 minutes. Write for 10 minutes. You said you would not check your phone for the first hour of the morning. Do not check your phone. These are not productivity tips. These are acts of repair. You are, with each kept promise, slowly mending the broken cord between your conscious will and your subconscious mind. You are teaching yourself after years of betrayal that you can be trusted again. And only when that trust is restored can the deeper transformations begin. I have seen men try to leap directly into great changes without first repairing this foundation. They declare massive intentions. They announce to the world and to themselves that they will transform their entire lives by Monday, and they fail. Of course they fail. They are asking a wounded animal to run a marathon. The wound must be healed first. The trust must be rebuilt. And it is rebuilt not in great gestures, but in the small, unglamorous, unwitnessed acts of keeping the smallest possible word. Now, before I close, I want to share with you the heart of what I have been saying tonight. Because all of these habits, the unconscious consumption, the directionless busyness, the language of poverty, the draining company, the self-betrayal, they are not 5 separate problems. They are 5 faces of one problem. And the one problem is this: you have been living, perhaps for many years, without an active relationship with your own future self. You have allowed your present self, with all its small fears and tired patterns, to dictate the terms of your existence. And your future self, the one who could have lived a life of meaning and abundance, has been waiting quietly, patiently, in some inner room you have not visited. The habits that impoverish you are simply the habits of a man who has lost contact with his own greatness. They are not signs of weakness. They are signs of forgetting, and forgetting can be reversed. The man you were meant to be has not died. He has only been buried under the accumulated debris of unexamined days. And tonight, in this hour, you have the chance, perhaps for the first time in years, to begin clearing the ground. I will not give you a system. I will not give you a method. The methods are everywhere, and most of them will fail you because they do not address the root. What I will give you instead is a single instruction, and I ask you to take it more seriously than anything you have ever taken from a stranger. Tomorrow morning, when you open your eyes, do not reach for your phone. Do not reach for the news. Do not reach for the noise of the world. Lie still for 60 seconds and ask yourself one question. What kind of man, what kind of woman am I willing to become today? Just that, 60 seconds, one question. And let the answer rise from a place deeper than your daily mind. If you do this faithfully for 30 days, I tell you with the full weight of everything I have learned, your life will begin to change in ways that will astonish you, not because of any magic in the question itself, but because you will have established, perhaps for the first time, a daily appointment with the part of yourself that knows the truth. And the part of yourself that knows the truth, once given a regular voice, will begin to redesign your habits from the inside, slowly, patiently, without violence. The poverty habits will begin to fall away, not because you have attacked them, but because they will have lost their host. They cannot live in a mind that has remembered itself. I have spent my life studying the laws of success, and I tell you that this is the deepest law of all. You do not become wealthy by adding wealth to a poor mind. You become wealthy by removing the poverty from the mind and then watching with quiet wonder as wealth begins to find you in 100 unexpected forms. Money is one of those forms, but there are others. There is the wealth of presence, the wealth of meaning, the wealth of mornings that begin with intention rather than reaction, the wealth of evenings that close with satisfaction rather than the dull ache of another day surrendered to nothing. And so I leave you tonight with a question, as I always do. Not a question to be answered quickly, but one to be carried like a small lamp into the dark corridors of the coming days. Which habit, which single habit, has been quietly impoverishing you for years while you look the other way? You know the answer. You have always known. The only question that remains is whether you will continue to look away, or whether tonight, in this hour, you will turn at last and meet it face to face. Because the day you stop running from that habit is the day your fortune begins to change. Not someday, that day, and every day after.